Hello and welcome to the Midnight Choir, the Rover Media Network's podcast. We are talking about many news articles. We do a ton of interviews, and if you enjoy that kind of stuff, it's usually focused on Quebec, although sometimes beyond that, Canada, the United States, the rest of the world. If you enjoy that kind of thing, we encourage you to subscribe. Go check out the newsletter at therover.ca/newsletter or therover.ca/support-us. If you want the paid newsletter, we encourage you just to enjoy our content, participate in what's going on, comment below, like this, dislike this. No one can see it anyway.
Send us severed dolls' heads.
Jesus.
Oh,
We're not giving you our address. We're not giving you our address.
I got a P.O. box. I don't care.
All right. Well, that's fine. Yeah, send them severed dolls' heads. Severed horse heads can't fit in the P.O. box.
No, you have to get a special box for that.
Today we are talking about illegal dumping in Mohawk territory. We will be scooping ourselves. We have an article about it coming out tomorrow, Saturday. What's the date today?
I don't think we'll be done. Yeah, I think this will be released before the article is released.
No big deal. So this came out on June 21st, 2024, and I believe the article will, at least one of many articles that probably come, will be coming out on June 22nd, 2024. So please enjoy the article tomorrow. This is some serious news. But when I say illegal dumping, I have no idea what that means to illegally dump on land. So, Chris, can we start off there? What is illegal dumping?
Okay, so if you're in the construction business and you need to make any kind of modification to the ground that you're working on, and you almost always do, you have to hire an excavation company. And excavation companies, how they make their money is not by how quickly they can dig the soil. It's by how quickly they can get rid of the soil, right? So getting rid of soil on a construction site is a long and expensive process. Generally, you have to take a sample of what the soil is. You have to tell the government what the soil is. You have to, if it's contaminated, you can only get rid of it in like a handful of sites in the greater Montreal area. And you can call some of these sites and say, this is the kind of contaminated soil I have. And they'll say, we're not equipped to handle that. We don't have the specialization. You have to go to this other. Anyways, it's very expensive. And so because our rules are we enforce, we don't enforce them is the thing. We have great rules in Quebec. We have great environmental regulations, but we just don't enforce them.
Okay.
No one's out there checking.
Is it just expensive?
It's expensive. There's a couple questions, and I think that's an excellent question. I think we might, over the course of this conversation, explore why don't we track it, and why aren't we enforcing these rules?
Okay.
And so what happens is companies across the greater Montreal area are saving on their soil disposal costs by taking contaminated soil, not reporting it to the government, and just driving it over to Mohawk territory, dumping it on private land. In some cases, they have deals with the people who own that land, the Mohawk people who own that land. They dump it on the land. They flatten it with a machine. They dump more, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks a week, possibly thousands of trucks a month.
Thousands of trucks a month.
Yeah, and what they're doing is they've contaminated so much of Kanesatake, this Mohawk res where the Oka crisis was. It's just northwest of Montreal.
Stop. Oka crisis.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big sort of like, the Oka crisis in a nutshell is the culmination of 270 years of land theft between the French European settlers, the Catholic Church, and the Mohawks. And in 1990, the Mohawks, who had lost so much of their territory to land theft, were about to have not an ancient burial ground, but a graveyard and like sacred forest destroyed so that the neighboring village, Oka, could turn their 9-hole golf course into an 18-hole golf course. Yeah, it's kind of super fucked up that this is what started a big, almost, revolution. So
wow.
So the police came in. This actually provides a lot of context as to why dumping on Mohawk territory is
seriously problematic.
Is super problematic, and why it's happening. So when they were about to raise this forest, dig up these graves, and build this golf course, the Mohawk warriors, the Warrior Society, and the women in the community resisted. They formed picket lines.
Thank God.
They put their bodies in the way of the machinery. But look, the Mohawks also consider themselves a sovereign nation, so some of the men were armed. And when the police came, they threw tear gas at the women. They threw tear gas at some of the protesters. Chaos ensued. Shots were fired. A Corporal Lemay from the Sûreté de Québec, from the provincial police, was shot to death. It was never proven whether it was one of his own guys or one of the warriors that
it could have been one of their own guys.
It could have been one of their own guys. Yeah, it's
you.
So that precipitated a
Whoa.
basically 2.5 month siege of this community, where at first the SQ.
When? What year was this?
1990.
Oh,
and yeah, and it's good because I always assume everyone's like super up to speed on it. But so in 1990, when violence broke out, the cops kept the Sûreté de Québec, the provincial police, really burned all their goodwill and were kind of universally disliked in Quebec, and certainly, especially in the Mohawk community. But they were then relieved by the Canadian military, and at one point, I think there was more Canadian soldiers involved in this operation than there had been in Afghanistan years later. It's like it was a huge military operation. It lasted the entire summer.
Did they displace this group?
The golf course was never built.
Good.
And the graveyard was never dug up. But the land the land, there's so much disputed land in Mohawk territory. Over the 30 years since then, the 34 years since then, more and more of this disputed land has just been absorbed by urban sprawl or by farmers or by housing developments. So land in Mohawk territory is a huge premium. There's not much of it. It's over about a 10-kilometer strip of shoreline, and it's about less than a kilometer wide. That's the rest. And there's almost no land left, and the land that is left is so polluted from all of this illegal dumping, and there are so many people in town who want to stop it, and they can't. So what they do is, and like what the whole strength of this, the only reason we know this is because really brave Mohawk whistleblowers are recording this illegal dumping. They are they're trying to physically stop trucks. They're doing whatever they can to get the evidence out there because.
So we talked about every piece of soil has to be recorded, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not recording it, obviously. That's fine. I understand. Why is it illegal? Did they not ask for permission? Is it specifically illegal because it's on Mohawk territory? Are people not allowed to give permission for them to dump?
Well, look, this you're right. Here's some more layers of how complicated this is.
Yeah. Please. So I have zero knowledge.
There's no illegal dumping on Indigenous territory goes back generations. Okay. It's a very old practice of just, if you have something awful to do, do it on Mohawk land. Look on the South Shore territory of Ganawage. I think I pronounced that wrong. It's spelled Ganawage, but it's pronounced a little bit differently. Look at most Indigenous territories that are near a city.
They have had dumping problems.
They've had dumping problems, and not only that, but look at the way that they built the St. Lawrence Seaway. Right, it's a huge, important shipping lane in Quebec and for all of North America. They dug up the seaway on existing Mohawk territory. They took all the refuse from the seaway and they placed it also on Mohawk territory. And it's all this clay, and it kills the soil under it. You can't do anything on it. Mm-hmm. So they have a whole section of town in Ganawage called the Clay Mountains, right? So it's no grass grows there. It's like there's houses on it because there's not much land. They need to use it. So and when you have a railroad that needs to be built, it's almost always built through Indigenous territory. When a power line has to be built, they confiscate Indigenous territory and they build it through
an oil pipeline.
An oil pipe. No, it's a tale as old as time.
Right.
And in the case of Kanesatake,
this is your land. You are a sovereign nation until it inconveniences us.
Yeah. Well, there was this stagnation in construction in Quebec in the 90s. And an explosion of construction in the 2000s, and I think a lot of that sparked competition and opportunity, and you had people who were greedy and wanted to save money and get bigger, and they did that by dealing with, by disposing of their shit illegally. And
Okay.
is there a law that specifically says you can't dump toxic waste on Indigenous territory? No, there actually isn't, and that's being worked on in the House of Commons by Elizabeth May, the
What
leader
about
of the Green
the
Party.
Assemblée nationale?
Well, our provincial laws, on the other hand, are very clear. Like whether it's...
Okay, so federally we have no laws, but provincially we do have laws.
Well, there's two laws that apply here. Federally, you can't dump refuse that close to water. And
Okay.
what's happening on the territory is like this Mohawk territory it's on the shores of where the Ottawa River meets the Lake of Two Mountains. And that's a body of water that feeds like 15, 16 communities near Montreal. Over 100,000 people use that lake for drinking water.
Okay.
So you have trucks dumping directly onto or into the lake. They're expanding the shoreline with this contaminated soil. And it's something to see. Like it is. And I realize that it sounds crazy and like I'm rambling and whatever, but
You're not rambling.
There are tracts of contaminated soil that are about 20 feet wide, 15 feet high, and the length of a football
15
field.
feet high.
Yes.
The length of a football field.
Yeah. It's unreal.
Sorry,
man.
I was saying that, I processed the next thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I had to yell into the mic.
Yeah, no, you should though.
Like,
you should. And like, so each of these loads, right, would cost like $700-800 if you were disposing of it correctly. And when you dispose of it with some sort of private deal with a landowner or like you fooled a landowner in Kanesatake to take this contaminated soil, you pay them $200 or $300. So it's not the kind of scam that you do once. It's the kind of scam that
you're saving $400.
You do thousands of times, right?
So you're saving. You save $500,000 on dumping.
An excavation company, we've spoken to a few experts, and they can save, because excavation companies go to all kinds of different job sites. They can save somewhere in the area of $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 a day by doing this. Now multiply that over a 6 or 8 month period, or over an entire season. You're saving millions of dollars, and those savings allow you to undercut your competition and say, "Look, these guys are quoting you at this price. We'll charge you 25% less." And that extra 25% profit you're keeping in your pocket. So that's about as sinister as it is. Like, it's not, what I mean to say is it's not some giant conspiracy. It's just people wanting to make more money and people not caring if they damage.
Are you saying capitalism is the problem?
No.
Let's be clear.
I pray at the church
we are an
of shareholder value.
Yeah, we are an extremely pro-capitalist group here.
Is the res literally on fire from all the garbage? Yes. Did the shareholders get their value in return? They also did. So, it evens itself out in the end, I think. Everyone's happy.
Everyone's happier.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the podcast.
No,
for real.
So it's like just explaining the base of the problem takes like 15-20 minutes. So these are like hard stories to write. But, we had uncovered one giant dump 4 years ago. And this dump was run by these brothers, Gary and Robert Gabriel. And they'd run it for about, I believe, 15 years. And what they did was they would just accepted anything. And they were supposed to have a limit of, I think it was 30,000 cubic meters of waste. And in the end, they ended up with 400,000 cubic meters of waste on this pretty small property.
Holy
mountains that went almost 30 feet high. You can see them when you're driving by. You can see them in the distance.
That's 5 Chris's.
That is. Oh, I'm gonna soak that one up. But the pile of refuse on this one piece of land got so, it got so concentrated with sulfur and with all these terrible chemicals that it would occasionally spontaneously catch fire. Neighbors. That's how bad it was.
That's amazing.
That shows up in provincial inspection reports that, like, hey, this is spontaneously catching fire. It's a really big deal. The province knew about it for years, and they fined the owners, but they never took action to remove their dumping permit or to stop even as they surpassed their legal dumping limit by a factor of 15.
Factor of 15.
Yeah, 15 times more than what they were supposed.
Holy
Even when this
shit.
one relatively...
This just gets worse everything you say.
It's one piece of property, and they had the equivalent of 160 Olympic swimming pools full of fucking contaminated soil. So that has taken years of reporting and years of pressure from local whistleblowers, politicians, whatever, to get either the federal or provincial or local band council to do something. And finally, in 2020, when this was the Rovers' first story, when we published something about it, their permit was revoked. The Gabriel brothers landfill permit to accept this dumpage, their permit was revoked, and it was assumed that, all right, well, the dumping's over. There's no place left for them to go. But instead, what happened is people just started dumping in smaller secret sites and doing a better job hiding it. So what they would do is you dump all this refuse, whereas the Gabriel brothers would accept everything: old concrete, old roof shingles, the refuse from a construction site. These new sites appear to almost only be taking contaminated soil, which looks like ordinary soil, doesn't glow in the dark or anything. And then they deliver it, they pack it down, and in the end, if they really want to make a show of covering their tracks, they'll put some earth over it, maybe some grass or whatever, just to like hide it. But no one really cares enough to even bother hiding it. So
do you remember? I mean, there's no way you don't. You remember the episode of Marge on the Monorail from The Simpsons?
Of course I remember that episode. Yeah, it was like a seminal moment in my life.
It's like the greatest. Well, they get the monorail because Mr. Burns' illegal dumping.
Yeah.
They fine him.
Yeah.
So maybe what this can lead
maybe
to...
Kanesatake is going to get Kanesatake is going to get a monorail?
Maybe we can get our very own monorail here.
Yeah. Oh, God. A town with money is like a mule with a spinning wheel. Nobody knows where he got it, and damned if he knows how to use it. I watched a lot of Simpsons.
Oh, it's my entire life, dude.
So it's like, that's just one like really small part of a much larger, scarier story. Uh-huh. And to get a sense of the extent of it, you have to deal with whistleblowers. A couple days ago, I was going around, like one of the whistleblowers took me around these different illegal sites, and the entire time he's got a shotgun on his lap. We're driving in his car.
Why does he have a shotgun?
Because the cops won't come if you call them. There's no local cops. The only police force is the police force where one of their officers was killed in 1990, so they don't have a good relationship with the community. And the community obviously doesn't trust them. So the law is kind of, or justice, is kind of what you make it. So this guy has a shotgun on his lap, and it's not, the only two slugs he had were loaded with rock salt, and one with rock salt and the others with rubber pellets. So
like biting someone in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, you're sending someone to the emergency room, but you're not killing them.
No, you're not going to die from that. But you're gonna have a welt.
But that's how this guy felt safe. It's the only way he felt safe doing this, going around, is if he's armed, and because of who's involved, and because of the amount of money that's involved, it's not unreasonable to feel unsafe when you're investigating this, and it's not like people who've been our whistleblowers in the past have had visits paid to them by friends of the suspected illegal dumpers, people who've spoken out about this, even privately. It's such a small community. There's only about 2,000 people that like the bullies can find them, and the bullies can wait outside their house, and the bullies can threaten them. But
most of the community, I assume, is against it.
Of course. Yeah. And I thank you. That's the next point I wanted to make.
It's a couple strongmen, eh?
Look, where you have no justice like this, you're going to have people taking advantage of it. It's not the majority. There's political divisions in town, and these are all the survivors of genocide. Like, it's not an easy thing to be a Mohawk in the 21st century, right? So this lack of justice, right? What ends up happening is, well, they'll make their own. And for some people, that's problem solving and de-escalation. For others, that's threatening someone who messes with your business. So, you have this growing network of whistleblowers that have tried everything they could. They've gone to the federal government. The federal government has told them, well, this is really a provincial jurisdiction. They've gone to the provincial government. The province has said, oh, well, it's near a waterway, so that's Fisheries and Oceans Canada, or it's Crown land because this is an Indigenous issue. So you should probably go speak to Ottawa. And then the band council will say, well, yeah, you should speak to Quebec or Ottawa. So it's this jurisdictional hole. There's no local police. the neighboring communities, there's still a lot of racism. So the assumption is that no one cares. No one's going to care if this happens on their land because we don't see them as being full human beings. And that is that is what's called environmental racism, right? It's why so many communities of color and indigenous communities are the victims of industrial pollution, because the majority doesn't care about what happens to minorities. And I think in this case, it's getting to a point where this absence of justice is forcing people to take it in their own hands. And, some of that is talking to us, helping us find a story. But there's also been frustrations. I think someone fired a warning shot over one of the trucks.
When was that?
Years ago.
Okay.
I think a few truckers were forcefully pulled out of their rigs and made to explain what they had in the back. We've heard of truckers using fake manifests. So here's what the problem is on the territory. What we're trying to do with our investigation is find out where the soil is coming from, who's participating in this scheme, and how aware are the general contractors making these huge condo towers in the city? How aware are they that the refuse on their construction site is going to Mohawk territory? Because while they may not be directly doing it, these general contractors, they're still legally liable.
What have your discoveries been?
Sorry?
What have your discoveries been?
Oh God. I hung out on the res for the last couple of weeks, just kind of I'd park my car by one of the dump sites, try to hide it, and I'd see a truck dump something. I'd follow the truck to a construction site, see it accept refuse there, follow it back to the res. So we've done that. I've done that 3 times. One of the construction sites is an industrial building in Laval near Highway 440. It's run by a company. So the company that's doing the dumping is called Nexus Construction.
Wow, we're naming names.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's going to be in the article, right?
It is in the article. It's out there already.
Are you releasing your map?
I don't know. I think I'm going to release the map, but I don't know what information I'm going to include. Okay. I have a map of where we've confirmed these dumping sites.
If you want, it's shocking, guys.
Yeah, and then I have a map of who the companies are involved and what other projects they're currently working on, and it's a lot of major construction projects are involved in this. And all I can say is I can confirm that 2 big major condo, I followed trucks for 6 hours and I found 3 construction sites. If I followed them for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, then we get the extent of this. But it isn't the most fun thing to do. It's time consuming, and it does feel a little bit dangerous. And I have on occasion lost the truck and had to kind of re-find it, and that's very stressful. But so you have a condo tower in Laval being built by a company called Chloracon. Try to contact them. They haven't gotten back to me.
Nexus, Chloracon.
Yeah, so Nexus is one of the job sites they were working on is run by a company called Loracon. And they do industrial construction. They've done really big housing developments. They're run by one of the owners of the company has a scholarship at Concordia. These are respected members of the business community. So Nexus was taking stuff from them and bringing it to the res. And then they were going to another site in Laval that's building, I think, a 10-story condo complex. It's one of those luxury condo complexes. It overlooks Rivière des Prairies.
It's one of those complexes that is the reason all of us are starting to struggle to pay rent.
Yeah, but I mean, it these are expensive. These are like $500,000 units, or less, or a little more. But it's extremely expensive, and I don't think the people know that. The people,
I'm sure it's not the individuals who know,
and maybe even the people on the site are ignorant about what's happening. But ultimately, if you're running this job site, you're legally liable for how the soil gets disposed.
Of course.
They may not know, but it is their job to know. And they haven't responded to my request for comment. And then the other place,
they're afraid, eh?
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they think the strategy right now is ignore it and hope that it goes away.
And it's not going away.
It's not going away. It's and I mean, you can ignore it and you can
fire.
It's just that there's not a million explanations for this, right? Maybe
Yeah.
there is. Maybe there's a great explanation for it. Maybe there is, but there aren't that many, and I suspect that they don't think they can gain anything by trying to explain their side of the story.
And they can't. I don't think they can. I don't think there's much to explain. We are saving about 50% of the cost of dumping by dumping illegally.
And so it's I mean, like saving millions of dollars, right? Over a long period.
That's not a great explanation.
No, it wouldn't be. But look, we don't know that. We have no proof of what their level of knowledge and involvement is because we haven't really had a chance to dig into it. But if you're not aware of where your soil is being disposed of, you're not being a responsible corporation. And apparently such a thing does exist. So the other construction site is I think it's called like Quartier. It's been changed. It's called Seville West. It's in Pointe Claire. It's near where one of the new REM train stations is going to be. So it's like a hot emerging neighborhood. It's an 80-unit building. It's massive, and it's phase 2 of a like luxury condo tower. And there, this company was using a trucking company called GTM Construction to dispose of the soil. So when I first
went from the REM site,
that's not the REM site.
So it's just in Pointe Claire.
Yeah, this is another crazy disambiguation. Is like none of these are happening on provincial constructions or construction sites where the customer is the province.
Okay,
because
these are all private customers.
This is all the private sector. In some cases, there might be some public investment or there might be some version of public oversight.
Right, but the public,
but fundamentally, these are private.
Know.
Yeah. So complicated. Sorry. So
that's my job. It's to ask questions to make it linear. So far, I think we're doing all right.
The other. So
shut us out in the comments if you're confused or you have more questions.
Yeah. So when I did this initial report, or one of the initial reports, naming Nexus and kind of explaining that we followed their trucks, I went back to the res. I didn't see a single Nexus truck. The week before, I think I saw 12 in like half an hour. Instead I saw these trucks from a company called GTM Montreal.
Okay.
Now GTM Montreal is also like a trucking and excavation company, and they were the ones on this big condo site in Pointe Claire. So these are all of these companies that run these sites, right? They are faced with the same problem. How do we get rid of our soil, and how do we get rid of our soil for cheap, or cheaper than the competitors or whatever? And if they're doing this on the regular, then they are doing this on dozens of job sites across Montreal, and not little ones, big ones, office buildings. In one case, a school, but it's a private school, so the government isn't a customer there. You have sites on Décarie, sites in the West Island, everything really within a 50-kilometer radius of the res. Like that's more or less where you're finding all of these sites.
Right.
And I suspect there's dozens and dozens of them because the extent of the pollution is just it's unreal.
Wow. Chris, why don't we have someone who's a whistleblower, somebody who's from the res on the podcast right now?
It's a very good question. I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is fear. Like you don't want to make yourself a target. You don't want the people doing this illegal dumping to say, oh, this is the guy resisting. Some people don't care. Some people have been vocal and open and they've like put themselves in the driver's face, but other people are understandably scared. There was an incident 4 weeks ago where two chiefs tried to muscle their way onto one of the dump sites and take soil samples, and they were beat up by the guy who runs the site.
This was a couple weeks ago.
This was not long ago. And the cops were there, and the cops didn't do anything. And there were provincial conservation officers there. They didn't do anything either.
Holy shit.
Yes, there is a kind of tacit acceptance that this can happen on Mohawk land. This would never be accepted in a white community. This would never be accepted in neighboring Oka. This would not be accepted in Saint Marthe or Saint Eustache or Two Mountains or whatever the suburban community might be. It just wouldn't be accepted. But we accept it on this land because of who lives on it, and because we, I think, as a society, value their rights less than we value our own. That's very sad.
That's a good reason to not come on a podcast.
That is a good reason to not come on a podcast. And the political angle is tough too, because the community is divided into these factions, which like that's what happens with colonialism, right? All that chaos and violence has to go somewhere. And since 1990, the Oka crisis, there's been a lot of paranoia in the community about who collaborated with the police, who didn't, who did enough, who went overboard. So there is a lot of mistrust, and it's unfortunate because it's a beautiful community. There's a ton of people fighting for a better tomorrow for their kids. There's a lot of revitalization of the Mohawk language happening. Some of the best artists, writers, intellectuals, like Mohawk Canada.
Well, I mean, the native community across all of the tribes is currently having like a renaissance of their culture. So
the most interesting art, the most interesting music,
probably in Canada, it's like coming out of
North America right now.
In Canada,
is Indigenous.
It's crazy, dude.
Res Dogs in the United States, which has has a Mohawk. Is it Devery Jacobs? Yeah, Devery Jacobs is in Res Dogs. She's a Mohawk. Like,
it kind of makes sense though, because like you think about like the United States and what is the most oppressed community. Probably Black folks, but I mean also Indigenous folks in the States. Who's been defining the artistic landscape for the past 30 years? Black people. Often it's the oppressed communities. Okay, this is a weird side tangent, but there's not really a ton of really excellent conservative art.
Or humor.
And you're like, well, why is it? Well, it's because oppression, sadly, breeds excellence in art. Weirdly.
And no, I think it's that truth, which I think is often what art is.
Art
right?
expresses truth through
right?
Through like metaphor and abstraction. That's the word I was looking for.
That is a very good use of abstraction. The truth is rarely on the side of the powerful, right? And on the side of the people keeping their boot on your neck. And their truth is not it's a lie, right? And what do we do when we hear a lie? Our fucking brain goes like, that's bullshit. So a lot of like conservative writings and a lot of conservative art or music or whatever, humor, it just focuses on like, oh, these people are poor, these people are dirty, look how stupid they are.
They punch down.
Look at they punch down. Like the redneck comedy tour is like, hey, rednecks are stupid. Like,
but the redneck comedy tours weren't even that bad because they were making fun of their own communities.
They were, but they were also, I think, they were making fun of their own communities, but they were kind of glorifying a kind of stupidity.
By the way, the redneck comedy tours are like pretty late 90s, early 2000s.
The blue collar comedy tour. Yeah, you might be a redneck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
But like, I kind of don't fault those ones because they were making fun of themselves.
Yeah.
But you're definitely right. Like we're like, especially modern, like the conservatives who are currently in comedy. It's like, did you know trans people exist?
Yes.
And you're like,
they laugh at the queer community. They laugh at Black Lives Matter. They laugh at leftists, and it's like, woke this, woke that. Like, I get it. It's what a terrible value it is to care about others. Ha ha ha! What a sucker I am. Like Rob Schneider is conservative comedy, and like, look his shit up. It's awful.
I know the name, but I don't know.
Yeah, thank God. Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo. He did that movie in the 90s.
Yeah, the Renaissance in Native culture is real.
Yeah,
and it's not stopping. Like it's growing, and like it's very supported as well financially by the government. Although the government is currently cutting back on.
Oh, they underfund the shit out of it, and like like this is basically it's not even beginning to pay reparations for what was taken from these people. So there there's like this is a vibrant community.
Yes.
And what's missing in a lot of this reporting is that all of this information that we know comes from the Mohawks taking risks and getting it to us in very creative ways. And I think we don't say that enough. And like this story doesn't exist without super courageous people on that territory. And they can't have their names in the byline because it exposes them to retaliation.
It's dangerous for them, man.
So I think I can't overemphasize how grateful I am for the people who are
sticking their necks out there.
Fuck yeah, man. And
who are driving around in a truck.
And like La Presse, a local newspaper, they've done great work on it. The Eastern Door, the Mohawk-owned newspaper on the South Shore, they've done some great work on it. Like there's
La Presse is always doing.
Oh yeah, they're a fantastic newspaper. They have some of the best journalists in North America.
If you want to hire me,
he's good. Isaac. Yeah. Let's get you hired. Yeah. So it's a beautiful community, but there's so little land. There's so little opportunity for economic development. There's so little funding for language programs, and that you create a situation where everyone's stuck in poverty. They're stuck on that treadmill of poverty.
Yeah. You can't get
So
out
how
of
do you get out of it? Well, I mean, they like some Indigenous communities might be near some natural resources, and they can maybe get a royalty on that, or some. There are no natural there sort of are. They're never going to be exploited. There's like niobium nearby, but the Mohawks don't have resources other than the fact that they're close to major urban centers, and so what ends up happening is people use their territory to dump on. And what we've also seen is with the legalization of cannabis, you've seen the emergence of dozens and dozens of locally owned cannabis shops.
You did a report on that.
Yeah. I mean, I did the first report on that in
2022.
2018.
In 2018. Okay.
Right around when it was legalized, like in Canada, just like right around then. I know this guy Clifton Nicholas, who opened the first dispensary, which was called Green Devil, or no. Yeah, it was called Smoke Signals.
So they're using indigenous lands to make cannabis?
Not make it. See, this is another, in the 90s, right, there's not a ton of Mohawk territory. Again, you need economic opportunity. You had locals who grew weed on the res and would sell it, to the Hells Angels or whatever. And that was a way of making a bit of money. But they realized we don't have a ton of land, so growing stuff is a kind of a waste of that land. Why not distribute it? So these cannabis places, they take they buy weed often from BC or from across the country, sort of in a legal gray area, and they sell it to customers. They take your ID.
Yeah. On the West Coast, I have a lot of friends who would specifically go to the Indigenous communities to purchase their weed.
That money, mostly these shops are mom and pop shops. They're owned by local people who will be using the profits to, in some cases, send the kids to school, live a middle class life that evaded you for generations. Have some measure of a sustainable life. So that's most of those businesses, but a few of them are owned by, in one case, one of them is owned by Gary Gabriel, who was doing all that illegal dumping. And let me give you an example of what happens when the community tries to regulate itself, but bad actors from outside come in. Some bad people partnered, I think, with Gary, or at least Gary began to associate with some very bad people. And then during a Canada Day party, and the Mohawks don't celebrate Canada, but everybody has the day off. So during a party on Canada Day at this guy Gary Gabriel's dispensary in 2021, he was sitting down at a terrace next to a pretty big time gang member from Montreal, and a guy walked up to the gang member from Montreal and pop, 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 hit him 3 times. Yep, got into a truck, got into a stolen vehicle that he had stolen beforehand, and drove it off through this sort of this path out of the res that you would have had to have scouted first, and burned the van, took a second escape vehicle and left. Anyways, that these are some of the people that associate with some of the people on the res. A super small minority, but if you're fighting for justice
against that
guy, then you're obviously going to be scared. One of these guys had one of the biggest gangsters in the city murdered right next to them, and and it was at a party on his dispensary that has now become a dispensary, a bar, a casino, and I think they even have fights there sometimes. Yeah, sanctioned fights. I know a couple of kickboxers who've been to the res and fought there. So it's another world, and unfortunately, what a lot of outsiders only see is the criminality, but we don't see
the other 1,000 of the 2,000 people, the other 1,990 people.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's
it's really
almost
just a handful
everybody
of bad dudes
fighting for justice, and then you have 10 guys.
Yeah,
and
all it takes is a willingness to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And one of these guys, like Gary, and I can say this because I have it down in an affidavit that I signed and like have with I have it in a safe place. When I was doing a report on Indigenous Peoples Day in 2017, a friend of mine, I won't name him out of respect for what happened, but a friend of mine who was a super reliable source, we were walking in the pines and a truck drives by us, and it's like this beautiful souped up orange pickup truck. Drives by us, like engine's roaring. I think it's a Hemi engine.
Okay.
He drives by us and then does like a violent U-turn, and I think, oh shit, this is not good. And it wasn't. And this guy, this was Gary, as it turns out. This is Gary Gabriel. He gets out of his car.
Okay, so you're sitting there with your friend.
Yeah.
Gary Gabriel drives
Rolls
by
up,
a big
yeah.
souped up truck, turns around,
Yeah.
starts yelling at your friend.
There's two guys in the truck. There's three guys in the truck. My friend says, don't fucking do anything. He might have a weapon on him. I didn't know who Gary Gabriel was at the time. I then looked him up and, okay, yeah, he's scary. So Gary gets out of the truck and after yelling at him, and he's yelling at him about like, you ratted me out over this thing. And like, my friend did not rat him out. Gary was referring to years and years ago, there was a conflict between the local police and the local band council and some local pot growers. And the band council tried to take over the local police by force because they assumed the local police was corrupt. So they went and they took out a loan from the federal government, and they hired all these Indigenous cops from different reserves across Quebec to form a sort of strike team to arrive on the res, take over the police, and then do a drug bust. This is in 2004.
Okay.
So it's very complicated. I'm sorry. So when these guys from the other res came to take over the police station, they went inside. They relieved the commander of his duties. They're going to go leave and do these drug busts, but they get surrounded by local people who do not want outside officers nosing around in their business.
Okay.
So Gary was one of the people who was there with like farm equipment surrounding the police station. So they trapped something like 40 cops in that station.
Gary Gabriel.
And as like a group of people, and he was there. I'm not saying it was his idea. I'm not saying he was the ringleader, but he was there. He was a part of it.
Okay.
So one group surrounds the police station while the chief, the band council chief, and all the cops he's hired are inside. And another group burns down the Grand Chief's house. And the Grand Chief is chased from the res and he can never come back. He's sent sort of in exile. He lives in Ontario now. Guy by the name of James Gabriel. I think a distant cousin of Gary's. So it's so like that's the guy you're dealing with is this guy who's not scared of anything. And so he rolls up on us and he's telling people, or like he's telling my buddy, oh, you ratted me out. He didn't. My buddy did not rat. Everybody knew. Everybody, I know. If I know, then it's because everyone fucking knows.
Right.
So everybody knew, and he ended up going to prison for that, Gary. And it wasn't the first time he was in prison. He's someone who's been convicted of assault multiple times. So
he assaulted your friend?
So as we're arguing, right,
okay.
over like, you ratted me out, you didn't. My friend knows how to handle himself, but he knows also not to fight back against someone who might be armed.
A loose cannon.
So and Gary's huge. Gary's like 6'3", 6'4". He's like, looks like a refrigerator. A tall refrigerator. He just starts swinging wildly at my friend, and my friend's not going to defend himself, or he's not going to fight back because he doesn't want to expand this. So he just kind of covers up, and as he's backing up, he had flip-flops on, he falls over, and Gary's got steel-toed boots on, so he starts kicking the guy, and he gets him in the head twice. Real bad, real nasty.
What were you doing?
I'm being held back, and my friend, as he's being beat up, is like, don't get involved, don't get involved, don't get involved. I'm being held back by Gary's son and another dude, and I'm like, I'm also frozen because like I didn't expect this interview to turn into a fight. And so I see my buddy get kicked, and just as that happens, the cops show up, the SQ, and nobody ever calls the cops on the res.
This is one of the one times that you're like, hey, cops might.
But yeah,
be
the
okay.
cops were called
Yeah, yeah.
because it was an extremely violent situation.
Yeah, those are the moments when we actually need cops.
So
you know,
so the cops don't even get out of their car; they roll down the window as they like. I'm carrying my buddy. My buddy's fucking bleeding. He's not doing well. And Gary turns to me in front of the cops and says, "You tell anyone, I will break your fucking neck. I'll snap your neck like a chicken." He tells my friend the same thing. You know, I'll kill you if you tell anyone. The cops see this. They see it. They don't do shit. They're terrified of Gary.
All right, never mind. This is not the time you want cops. You
So-
know, they almost had a chance to do something good.
So I'm helping my buddy to my car because I'm going to drive him to the hospital. And by the way, he ended up with two fractures in his skull
Yeah.
and a concussion. And I'm taking my buddy to the car, and he just tells the cops, like, I got to keep living here. I can't rat this guy out. I can't do anything. So he, you know, very bravely, you know, he took him to the hospital, and you know, it was the only time I've ever been a reporter where I was like scared for my life was when
Not when you went to the Ukraine
no,
war front?
I was never scared there. I was scared when I thought like, oh shit, is Gary going to finish the job? Is he going to come? Like, so my friend had to basically guard his own house, like with a concussion, not fall asleep, coffee, concussion, and a shotgun in his house that whole night. He was worried that Gary would come back. He didn't. And I really and I don't want this to be the Gary Gabriel is terrible hour, because like, it's not the point of this, but he is a super.
But it is a factor.
But no, it's a factor in why people aren't talking, because you know he's a scary, rich, and powerful guy,
and who's with a violent criminal behavior.
Yeah,
and convicted and is willing to use force. So
like, I didn't say anything to the cops because that's the way my friend wanted it. But I also was like, you know what? I'll swear an affidavit to what I saw in case anything happens. Right? I want it clean. I want to make sure that I have all the facts down. So like, to this day, I have an affidavit ready to go if anything happens to me or my buddy. And so like, that's the person you're dealing with. And when people say, oh, why don't they just chase them out of town? Why don't they imagine that? Like, would you chase that person out of town?
No, dude.
Yeah.
No, dude.
Like, especially given how
rich, powerful mob ties. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
So that kind of begins to
unravel this.
How this is not an easy story to report on, and it's not because like it's dangerous in that, but mostly like you want to get it right, and you want the community to not be depicted as this cartoonishly bad place. Even though
it's a couple bad actors.
Yeah, and like all of like the pressure is all coming from the outside. It's these people who want to make more money, and you find a vulnerable person who needs some cash, and you give it to them to do something bad, and that person gets some measure of financial stability for the first time in their life. So
this is how it works, man. Like, poverty drives people to do these things because they need to like survive.
Exactly. So that's what I'm working on.
Thank you for joining us today. Check out the article. Go sign up for the free article at therover.ca/newsletter, or sign up for the paid article, therover.ca/support-us. Like this, subscribe to this. Please check out our articles. If you're on the podcast, if you're just listening, 5 stars, please. We are growing slowly, but consistently. We're trying to get to 1,000.
I ran into some dude the other day who listens to the podcast. I was walking by Next Door Pub, and this guy looked at me and said, "Podcast." I was like, "What?" And he said to say thanks, and then he loves the podcast.
Shout out to you, my dude.
I fucking forgot his name. He was a super nice
guy.
Well,
we don't want to.
I'm saying this because he likes
random man.
Well, docs, you know.
You say like Fred, and like these like people on the internet, like, is it this Fred? Who's that Next Door Pub on like Thursday 2 p.m.?
We'll find you. We'll find you and reward you. No, and my friend Marilyn, who's an amazing nurse and studying for her master's at McGill right now, she said she loves the show and to say thanks.
Well, we love doing it. So guys,
best, man.
Share it with your friends because they'll love it too. Thank you and good night.